Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, once again to another edition of Cast with Q. Sponsored by a dissatisfaction with the system. On tonight's program, we got us a surprise guest. I'm sure you're all waiting for our edition of Rag o' Mag, where we go over Isom by Eric July. Don't forget about Tales from Magonia. Tunguska 1908's our topic tonight. And obviously, we can't end without Quote of the Day. So without further ado, may I introduce to you, Mr. Q.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Cast with Q. On tonight's program, obviously, we've gone over some of the segments we're going to have. Welcome back to everybody. This is the second of the reboot of the series here. You might have been wondering where I was last week. I'm not going to tell you. Let's move on to our first segment here. You know what? No, I want to say something. You might have noticed that I now have a mustache on my face instead of what I had before, which was just like 5 o'clock shadow. Well, I want to tell you something. I had this mustache, okay? I've had this mustache on and off, time and again. And my brother Michael noticed that I had this mustache. And he was like, that's a nice mustache. And he grew his own mustache. And when we all saw each other at this, my grandma turned 85 today. So we all met up at my parents' house to celebrate my grandma's birthday. And my brother had a mustache on his face. And then he said that it wasn't because I looked good with it. He said, oh, it was my idea. You're copying off me. I felt like you guys should, like, I needed to get that off my chest. Anyway, good evening. So yeah, tonight's kind of going to be kind of a quick stream tonight. I think that what we're we're just going to go over Isom for our Rag or Mag session, and then we're going to do the Tales from Magonia session, which is Tunguska, which is just absolutely fascinating. So let's get into it then, shall we? Let me bring up a little bit that you guys can see of Isom here. So, oh, I hope I have that other program up. I don't. Okay. Hold on one second, because I want to have my notes up so I can talk to you guys about this. There it is. Okay. So, Isom number 1. Essentially, this is written by a guy by the name of Eric July. If you're watching this show, you probably know who Eric July is. If you don't know who Eric July is, essentially he is a YouTube personality. He started as, I guess. He started talking about comic books, and he kind of moved into some of the ways that politics and the culture have affected comic books now, pretty recently here. He's very much against tokenized characters. I would say he's very much against like bad versions of tokenized characters. As he's stated many times, characters like She-Hulk, they kind of earn their stripes and they earn their place in the what do you call that? The pantheon of heroes, I suppose. But what he's talking about primarily is things like Miles Morales' Spider-Man, which is obviously just a tokenized version of Spider-Man. And when you actually start to look into the kind of like the copyright stuff behind that, like what kind of money Marvel has to pay Steve Ditko and his family rather at this point, if they use Miles Morales, they have to pay them less, and it becomes very interesting the motivation of why they make certain characters a certain way. Is it because they want to let that's always we just want to let kids see themselves in these heroes. Is that the reason? Or is it because you don't want to pay the Ditko estate? Anyway, that's an aside. Eric July has for a long time decried all of this bullshit, this nonsense in modern comic books. And he decided, as I have decided too myself, that instead of complaining about it all the time and always being upset about it, to create our own material, to create our own products. and essentially do what other people refuse to do and refuse to earn money for. And lo and behold, when you do what people want you to do, when you base your business model off of what your customers desire from you and not what you desire to teach to your customers, lo and behold, you become very successful. Eric July, in a matter of, what was it, a month and a half maybe, made $3.7 million off of this comic book. This comic book, which is, 80 pages or something like that? You can see it here. This is the cover B, actually. Signed. You're like, why is he handling it like that? I'm certainly of the mind that even if I have a signed comic book, like I guess I would say I don't buy comic books so that I can sell them later. Like, I buy them so that I can read them and I can have them. And, if they happen to go through my possession and go on to my Spawn or their Spawn, if I have Spawn. I do actually have King Spawn and a couple other issues over there. Boom. But if they do then pass on, then you can sell them if they're worth anything at that point. I'm sure that Isom #1 is going to be worth something. A signed version of Isom cover B with Yaira on it. Everybody likes Yaira. Why? I wonder why. I keep getting sidetracked. This is a great picture. Anyway, this is Isom. He's a brand new superhero. This is Yaira. These are actually the cards. I didn't write anything down about that, so I might as well talk about these now. I was one of the few people who got in early enough to get these cards. I knew about this about Isom for a while, ever since he announced it, pretty much, because I do follow him. He's one of the few people who I'm like, wow, that guy is brilliant. But anyway, these are the cards that came with. Well, I bought them essentially, and these cards are amazing. I mean, they're huge. On the back, they've got details of the characters, details that are not in the actual issue. And let's see if I can do it. He always did it in his streams. They're lenticular. Can you see it? Can you see that they're lenticular? Look at that. It's cool. It's cool. These, I assume, will be collector's things at some point, too. I keep them out like this. I don't know. I just like it. I like looking at them. I think they're cool. And I can't wait till there are more of them, and I have all of them. But anyway, let's keep going, shall we? There's one of Isom, obviously. This is the cover that I have. You can see that it's signed there. Cover number B. I also bought cover A, and I've lent that one out because that was the purpose of that. I wanted one of these for myself and one that I could lend out to people. Because... Well, I really believed in what Eric July was doing with this comic book, and I was more than happy to support this. And honestly, I'm happy that he did this because I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I had no idea about Comicsgate or any of that until I realized, oh, wait a minute, Eric July's doing something. And then I started looking into stuff, and I was like, oh, there's a whole group of people who want to make good comic books. So... I'm really thankful for that, and I'm thankful for Eric July in general, because somebody doing what he's doing, we need it. So good on him. Anyway, yeah, this cover's really tight, very, very tight. I also got a shirt with it. I'm not wearing it right now because that'd be overkill, but it's a cool shirt. I like this shirt a lot. And then here, I got a picture of my favorite character. His name is Santuan. He reminds me of Jaws from James Bond, but he's got like those gold teeth. I can't tell if his teeth are gold or if they're just rotten. Anyway, it's pretty cool. I'll talk about that in a second. Here's the back of one of the cards. Brian Solari is this guy's name. 6'4", 245 pounds. Wait a minute, what? Oh, no, yeah, 245 pounds. I thought for a second that was a 1. He was born in Texas. Wow. Solari, it's an interesting last name. And so those cards actually came in this little box here. And it was really cool because the box was like... Yeah, it's like telling you not to open it. Yeah, when you open it up, you get this.
You did not heed the warning. Your fate is sealed, mortal.
That's what I imagine. Okay, so what else do I have here? I also got the concept art book. I love concept art. So I got that. And it's really cool. And again, I took a picture of Santuan because he's my favorite character in this. But yeah, so very cool stuff. I think my favorite thing of this was probably the concept art book. And it's like that. So I'll leave this up here. Well, I can't really do that, can I? Well, let's do this. We'll put that there. Hi. Okay, we're back. So let's go over it, shall we? Let's do the story first. I think that's a little bit longer I've written than the art. Okay, so essentially this story is basically just a setup for the rest of the universe. It's fair to see that there's not a lot wrapped up in this story. In fact, like nothing is wrapped up in this story. But it serves really to predominantly open up questions and possible storylines amongst the characters. We're introduced to Avery Silman, who's our main character, who we learn was previously known by Isom and kind of engaged in superheroic activities around the city before the events of this story. In this universe, people with superpowers are called excepts, which is, I assume, a shortening of the word exceptional. While Isom demonstrates that he has abilities that are far surpassing to an average man, it's alluded to several times that he's not technically an except. They make comments about the bracelets that he has on his wrist and on his ankle. Like at one point he's in a hospital and they say that they can't get the bracelet off or something like that. But anyway, the police in this town of Florist Park, Texas, they have their own group of excepts that work for them called Alpha Corps. And they're pretty much there to combat superpowered threats. And they state that, which kind of implies then that Florist Park deals with such threats on a pretty regular basis. We're also introduced to Yaira, who we learn that is this lady right here. We learn that Brian Solari of Alpha Corps, one of the superpowered policemen, he has a kind of a background with her. It seems, from what I can tell, that they're both kind of like maybe like experiments, but that remains to be determined. Like the whole point is that you're asking questions like, who are these people? Why are these people? And I think he's been pretty clear that he's going to give Yaira her own series. So that'll be something interesting. So I would say on the first read through, I'm just going to be honest about it. Like, I was a little underimpressed on the first read through of the story, and I didn't really know how to feel about it. However, like, after I read it a second or third time, I began to notice a lot more depth in what the characters were saying than I had previously. And that actually, I'll say this much too, that is a characteristic I find of all of my favorite things ever. So as an example, when I was 17, I was laying in my bed bored, and I started listening to The Super Unknown by Soundgarden. And I listened to that album the first time, and I was like, there's some songs in there I really like, but, it's okay. And then I listened to it again, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And then things started to click. And when it's almost like there's such a wash of stimuli at one point that you can't really take it all in until you've habituated yourself to the beginning stimuli, and then you can see other things and be like, whoa, okay, so that's cool and interesting. And that's what I felt like with Isom. On first read through, I was like, what is going on with this dialogue? Why do they sound like why are they speaking like that? And it was, I would say, it didn't pique my interest. But then the more you read, when you read it again, you start to actually notice the intricacies and the depth of what people are saying, and it becomes, I'll just keep going here. So, when you really pay attention to what they say, these characters illustrate their backgrounds pretty well, and they generate questions about the universe. And generating questions is always a good way to keep people coming back to your comic book. So that's a huge, huge plus that he did in this. It's very cool. So generally speaking, in this book, Avery Silman is tasked by his sister to check up on an old family friend. And when he does, he finds that she's embroiled with another old friend, one of his old friends, except that he's kind of a dick now. He also happens to be in control of a large swath of the criminal underworld in Flores Park, Texas. So it's not really the greatest of situations. And that character I mentioned before, Santuan, actually works for him. He's an except who just is like a bouncer. Isom learns of these sordid affairs, and he really tears up the mob boss's joint, and he really, really messes up some dudes. Like, there's a point at which he punches a guy, and you can see that he, like, cracks several of his ribs, if not his whole sternum, which is like, did he kill him? Because the guy was, like, lying, like, clutching his chest, lying in a puddle of blood afterwards, and I was like, whoa. What? That's going to leave a mark. Anyway, he gets kicked out of the mob boss's joint, and it's established that he can't fly. It's actually one of my favorite parts of this comic book. Near the end, he goes to the guy who designed his original suit back when he was operating as a superhero, and the suit maker drops several hints that he has clientele from space and other places, pretty much confirming aliens in this universe. Again, it's like the more you read it, like, oh, he's saying that he gives costumes to aliens. So this universe has aliens in it. And then, you start to pick things up. Anyway, when the suit maker asks Isom what he wants the suit to protect him from, Isom says fall damage. So he can't fly. It seems that he's pretty strong and pretty durable. But the specifics of how much is... It seems like he's almost like Cap level strength. But we still haven't seen anything else. We don't know what the full extent of his powers is. All in all, the story was enjoyable enough to keep me reading to the end. There weren't any moments of cringe, and the dialogue was fairly good. That's usually where I get the cringe moments, is where I read some dialogue and I'm like, ugh, not good. But this was good. And where it shines is by opening up the universe in a lot of different ways that you realize when you look at the work a little bit more closely. So I really appreciate depth in writing. On to the hard part for me. Art. So I'll state first and foremost that I'm not an artist. I can't do what Cliff Richards can do. I can't. But personally, I'm not a fan of what he does. I'm not trying to insult him or anything like that. It's just not my personal taste. And there's one point that I'm going to point it out here because I didn't like it that much at all. Wait a minute, let me get back to here. Go screen capture. And do this here. So it is right here. Essentially, Santuan and Isom are fighting one another out in the street. This is round... Well, it's round 2 in this comic book, but Santuan references that they fought before. They fought each other before, and that he beat him that first time too. So this would be fight 3 betwixt the two of them, but fight 2 that we've seen. Anyway, they jump up in the air like this, and you can see it's the full page. It's a big spread. They're jumping up. It's like, all right, we're gonna have a pretty huge collision here, and then this happens. They I honestly, I need help here. I don't understand what happened. He jumps up at him. They're moving towards each other. They have momentum because they've jumped. And then they, slide backwards. And my first thought was maybe they, missed each other and slid by each other. But they're on the same side. It's like they met in midair and there was a force bubble that, pushed them back. I don't understand what happened there. And it's even more strange because, so you can't, what happens here? What is this action? I don't understand what's going on in these panels. But it's weird because the next page, so Isom jumps at him like that, literally about to throw, look at this, he's about to throw his right fist in a punch. And Santuan grabs his right fist, which is nice, pulls him up like this, and then throws him down on the ground. The kinetic feeling and action of that is is evident. It's very nice. I love this is my favorite action page in the book, where he grabs him and swings him all the way around and slams him on the ground. It's great. I love it. So it's like, why? What happened on the last page? Like, did he have a stroke or something? I don't know. But look, I mean, yeah, I can't do this art. I can't do that. So it's just not my taste. But this page here I really like because he really shows the kinetic energy of what's occurring, and that's always fun. So let's actually get back here. So yeah, that's kind of my main gripe with the art there. While the art is kind of mid, it does illustrate at least what's going on, and there are few moments of confusion as to, like, wait a minute, what action is taken there, who's speaking, that kind of thing. And in a visual medium, that's the most important thing. So yeah, there we go. That's our session of Rag or Mag here. In the long run, I would say it's a mag. This comic by its success alone has shown that there's still a large group of people who want comic books to simply entertain people, and I'm excited to see where many of the threads that have been introduced in this issue will go from here. I'm certainly going to be backing. He says, ordering Isom #2. Yeah, if you guys have a chance to check it out, I would highly recommend it. If you get an issue now, it might be worth something big in the future. You never know. You never know. Alrighty then. Let's see here. What do we want to do? That's our issue of Rag or Mag there. Let's go on to Tales from Magonia. I'm going to put a picture in here. I should have added it before, but I didn't. So I'm going to pop it in here. And so anyway, tonight we're going to talk about Tunguska, 1908. This is a particularly interesting event that people have generally, disregarded as an asteroid collision. But they can't really explain that. So then they have other more ridiculous theories. So let's go here. Let's I'm gonna give you a little picture like this. Bink. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? That's beautiful. This is a part of the area of Tunguska. No, part of the where I want to do this so that it's not in the way. There we go. So yeah, I was reading a book on this by a fellow by the name of Paul Stonehill, and it's called Russia's Roswell. It's actually kind of predominantly focused on the incident at Dalnogorsk, but it also does have a large section dedicated to Tunguska, and that's where I got most of my information. And then I was looking at Wikipedia to see, does Wikipedia have at least like somewhat close to a legit, like are they close, or are they kind of messing around with people? It's actually most of the information that I found on Wikipedia was what I found in that book. They don't really try to, cover anything up or anything. So I might as well read that, but let's bring it up on the screen for you folks, shall we? Well, am I gonna get rid of that then? Get rid of Tunguska. Bring up the screen capture. Sorry, still learning all this. Anyway, here we have the Tunguska event. Occasionally also called the Tunguska incident, was an approximately 12 megaton explosion that occurred near Podkamenia Tunguska River in Yenisei Governorate, now Krasnoyarsk Krai, Russia, on the morning of June 30th, 1908. The explosion over the sparsely populated eastern Siberian taiga flattened an estimated 80 million trees over an area of 2,150 kilometers squared of forest, and eyewitness reports suggest that at least 3 people may have died from the event. The explosion is generally attributed to a meteor airburst, the atmospheric explosion of a stony asteroid about 50 to 60 meters in size. The asteroid approached from the east-southeast and likely with a relatively high speed of about 27 kilometers per second. It is classified as an impact event, even though no impact crater has been found. The object is thought to have exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers rather than having hit the surface of the Earth. The Tunguska event is the largest impact event on Earth in recorded history, though much larger impacts have occurred in prehistoric times. An explosion of this magnitude would be capable of destroying a large metropolitan area. It has been mentioned numerous times in popular culture and has also inspired real-world discussion of asteroid impact avoidance. Actually, my dad and I took those numbers. He just happened to be sitting next to me, and I mentioned this story to him, and we took those numbers and estimated, and it turns out that Tunguska would have completely obliterated St. Louis, Missouri. You know that place with the arch? That really shitty town with the arch. Hey, I live in St. Louis. That's not a shitty town. If you live there, you know it's a shitty town. Description. On the 30th of June, 1908, before the implementation of the Soviet calendar, at around 7:17 local time, Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills of northwest Lake Baikal observed a bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky and leaving a thin trail. Closer to the horizon, there was a flash producing a billowing cloud, followed by a pillar of fire that cast a red light on the landscape. The pillar split in two and faded, turning to black. About 10 minutes later, there was a sound similar to artillery fire. Eyewitnesses closer to the explosion reported that the source of the sound moved from the east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of kilometers away. The explosion registered at seismic stations across Eurasia. The airwaves from the blast were detected in Germany, Denmark, Croatia, and the United Kingdom, and as far away as Batavia, Dutch East Indies, and Washington, D.C. It's estimated that in some places the resulting shock wave was equivalent to an earthquake, measuring 5.0 on the Richter magnitude scale. On the next few days, night skies in Asia and Europe were aglow. You might say, okay, where's the evidence? Well, let's go back, shall we? We've got a little article on phenomena related to the Great Siberian Meteor, and this comes from the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, which is British. Anyway, let's read it, shall we? Phenomena in the sky. As to the remarkable glows seen in the sky of northern Europe during the nights of June 30th to July 1st and 2nd, 1908, which is the exact time that occurred, there are a few additional contemporary references in scientific publications, notably accounts by Suring and by Van Everdingen. Everdingen. That's a weird name. So it says, Dr. R. Rolf kindly translated for me several extracts from reports in Swedish newspapers. According to Vartland, a Stockholm evening paper, there was on the night of June 30th a distinct limit between the strange illumination and the ordinary light of the sky. Another evening paper, Aftonbladet, says that the night of July 1st was less bright than the previous one, but that of July 2nd surpassed its predecessors. Very good photographs could be taken on July 2nd at midnight. The luminous clouds were sometimes snow-white, sometimes golden. The localization of the luminosity on the first night is stressed in the report of an observer at Stala near Gothenburg. At about 1 hour after sunset, there appeared on the northerly sky an extraordinarily strong light, magical and very imposing in the fair summer night, and so brilliant that one could read the minutest lettering. This lasted until 2 or 3 a.m. At last the glow changed to red in the northwest and almost to green in the northeast. The brilliance of the night of July 2nd in Scotland is vouched for by Mr. W.C. Hart, who has a photograph of Dorna Cathedral taken at midnight with an exposure of 90 seconds. Anyway, so there you go. There's some interesting eyewitness reports that I'd like to read. I find these fascinating. According to the testimony of S. Semyonov, as recorded by Russian mineralogist, how do you say that word? Mineralogist. Leonid Kulik, who apparently was a kind of like an Indiana Jones type character. And by that I mean he would whip people. No, by that I mean, well, maybe not an Indiana Jones type of guy. More like their classic Tomb Raider type fella. He would go to extreme lengths to get what he desired. He was trying to find essentially the remnants of said meteor that caused this Tunguska explosion, because he was convinced that it was, what was the metal he was looking for? I think it was nickel. He was convinced that it was pure nickel, and so he convinced Stalin. What was it, Stalin at the time? Yeah, in 1930. He convinced Stalin to fund essentially an expedition into the Tunguska to try to go find this pure solid nickel asteroid so that they could, have some resources there. Of course, there's no such thing was ever found. So anyway, according to Semyonov, at breakfast time, I was sitting by the house at Vanavara trading post, approximately 65 kilometers south of the explosion, facing north. I suddenly saw that directly to the north, over Ankul's Tunguska Road, the sky split in two and fire appeared high and wide over the forest. As Semyonov showed, about 50 degrees up, expedition note. The split in the sky grew larger, and the entire northern side was covered with fire. At that moment, I became so hot that I couldn't bear it, as if my shirt was on fire. From the northern side, where the fire was, came strong heat. I wanted to tear off my shirt and throw it down, but then the sky shut closed, and a strong thump sounded, and I was thrown a few meters. I lost my senses for a moment, but then my wife ran out and led me to the house. After that, such noise came as if rocks were falling or cannons were firing. The earth shook, and when I was on the ground, I pressed my head down, fearing rocks would smash it. When the sky opened up, hot wind raced between the houses, like from cannons, which left traces in the ground like pathways, and it damaged some crops. Later we saw that many windows were shattered, and in the barn a part of the iron lock snapped. Interesting. So then we have a different one. This one comes from Chuchan of the Shanyagir tribe. I believe he's probably an Evenk tribesman. We had a hut by the river with my brother Chikaran. We were sleeping. Suddenly we both woke up at the same time. Somebody shoved us. We heard whistling and felt strong wind. Chikaran said, "Can you hear all those birds flying overhead?" We were both in the hut, couldn't see what was going on outside. Suddenly I got shoved again, this time so hard I fell into the fire. I got scared. Chikaran got scared too. We started crying out for father, mother, brother, but no one answered. There was a noise beyond the hut. We could hear trees falling down. Chikaran and I got out of our sleeping bags and wanted to run out, but then thunder struck. This was the first thunder. The earth began to move and rock, and the wind hit our hut and knocked it over. My body was pushed down by sticks, but my head was in the clear. Then I saw a wonder. Trees were falling. Their branches were on fire. It became mighty bright. How can I say this? As if there was a second sun. My eyes were hurting. I even closed them. It was like what the Russians call lightning, and immediately there was a loud thunderclap. This was the second thunder. The morning was sunny. There were no clouds. Our sun was shining brightly as usual, and suddenly there came a second one. Chikaran and I had some difficulty getting out from under the remains of our hut. Then we saw that above, but in a different place, there was another flash, and loud thunder came. This was the third thunderstrike. Wind came again, knocking us off our feet, struck the fallen trees. We looked at the fallen trees, watched the treetops get snapped off, watched the fires. Suddenly Chikaran yelled, "Look up," and pointed with his hand. I looked there and saw another flash, and it made another thunder. But the noise was less than before. This was the fourth strike, like normal thunder. Now I remember well there was one more thunderstrike, but it was small, somewhere far away, where the sun goes to sleep. So yeah, these are some pretty. That one I think really. I mean, both of those combined really get me. It's very interesting when they say the sky split in two. Absolutely fascinating. So yeah. Essentially, the excuses given by excuses. I don't know. I would say this much, that explosion was the size of, if not bigger than, some nuclear explosions, and that occurring in 1908 and it occurring several kilometers above the surface of the Earth and not when it actually hit the Earth is a very strange subject. It's a very strange concept indeed, and the explanations for it have been, well, what I would consider laughable and ridiculous. It's funny. Like, you have these people who say that it was essentially a complete ball of ice, and that as it moved through the atmosphere, the interior of the ball of ice heated up so much that by the time it got to, what was it, 5-6 kilometers above the Earth, that it exploded, and that's what caused, it was a shock wave, which caused, there's an indentation in the ground, certainly, and that's where the trees are flattened. But then also that's why there's never been any asteroid bits or any pieces of it recovered. Which doesn't make any sense. Like, why would, if it was a solid ball of ice, why would it melt from the inside out? And even when they provide this explanation, it just sounds like, how in your mind does that sound more plausible than that it was maybe, say, some sort of vehicle that exploded, and that moved specifically to that area to avoid as many casualties as it could? You might say that sounds ridiculous. Well, so do all the other theories. They sound equally as ridiculous and equally as based on really fanciful nonsense. So anyway, there's one person, though, who didn't think that concept, that it might have been some sort of vehicle. There's one person who didn't think that was completely a ridiculous idea, and that person goes by the name of Lavrenti Beria. And Lavrenti Beria was like one of the worst men ever to have lived. He essentially was in charge of the KGB for a good while under Stalin, and he is responsible for the deaths and torture of, I don't know, I have no idea, thousands of people. But anyway, Lavrenti didn't seem to think that concept, that it was a vehicle, was all too ridiculous. So let's that book I mentioned, the Paul Stonehill Roswell of Russia, that book, whoa, why is that there? That book essentially goes over some of this, and so I'd like to go over it with you guys. Okay, so it says Valentin Solomshikov. There it is. Valentin Solomshikov, noted Russian scientist and journalist, published an article in NLO magazine in 1999 about a secret Soviet military expedition to Tunguska, sanctioned by Lavrenti Beria, a Soviet statesman and at the time a Politburo member. That's important. Beria was the chief of the dreaded Soviet secret police and was put in charge of the Soviet atomic weapons program in the late 1940s. So he was a very, very powerful man. Very powerful man. In the summer of 1949, Beria, during a high-level secret meeting, announced his interest in sending a research team to the area of Tunguska. Now, unlike previous expeditions, Beria's group had no interest at all in looking for fallen meteorites. Beria suspected that a nuclear-powered spaceship might have exploded over the Siberian taiga in 1908, and if that were true, he wanted complete information about the incident for its possible military application. Beria's Tunguska expedition was to take place 1 year... Let me go to the next page. 1 year after the testing of the first Soviet atomic bomb. Alexander Petrovich Kazantsev, a retired Soviet army colonel who later became a leading ufologist and popular science fiction writer, first proposed the theory that the Tunguska event may have involved an ET spacecraft. Excuse me. Kazantsev was not mentioned as being involved in Beria's expedition, although he clearly may have been the inspiration for it. Meanwhile, Beria refused to invite any civilian scientists to be a part of his expedition, and instead selected military experts in the fields of atomic weapons and ballistics. Before the expedition left, Beria demanded that his assistants collect all information about the geophysical effects of the explosion on the surrounding areas. Thus it was that with great care, readings of devices of Russian and German meteorological stations from June 30th, 1908 were analyzed and researched. This project confirmed that the wave of air caused by the explosion circled the Earth several times. Research showed that the energy produced by the explosion was the equivalent of several dozen megatons. Also, the airburst occurred at the altitude of 12 miles. Information received from the Irkutsk Geophysical Observatory were also confirmed. That intensive disturbances of the Earth's magnetic field, recorded several minutes after the event, were like the events of a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere and included increased ionization. It was noted that this increased ionization allowed the Irkutsk scientists to receive radio waves from Europe, something that had never occurred before. Before Beria expedition left for the taiga, a reconnaissance airplane twice flew over the taiga of the Tunguska event and took photographs of the forest at different altitudes. I keep pressing side to get to the next thing. Each member of the team carefully studied Kulik's reports, that the previously mentioned Kulik, what was his first name? I forgot. They each carefully studied Kulik's reports and photographs from his expeditions. Then, in the summer of 1949, the expeditions of 1930. Kulik's, remember when I talked about he went to go get that nickel asteroid? Yeah. So then, in the summer of 1949, members of Beria's secret expedition, posing as geologists on routine mission, were flown to the Vanovara settlement, where they boarded a hydroplane and flew to Chiko Lake, a small freshwater lake in Siberia, near the Podkamenia Tunguska River. They were forbidden to ask local residents questions about the Tunguska event, but they were permitted to log down any information they might happen to overhear. The scientific findings of Beria's expeditions were never published, but enough details about them have leaked out to suggest that the findings were quite different from data gathered by expeditions sent by the Soviet Science Academy and the Committee for the Study of Meteorites. Beria's military scientists established that the trees were fallen by a percussive wave resulting from the energy of the object itself, and not by a ballistic wave, such as is created by the passing of a high-speed flying object. They also confirmed that the airburst occurred at a high altitude and that its force was over 1 megaton. However, they also reported that no traces of radiation of any significance were found in the area. After an atomic bomb explodes, there is a substantial radioactive present in the atmosphere. Beria's military scientists concluded that the explosion had to be thermonuclear in nature, fusion rather than fission. Upon their return to Moscow, the scientists in charge of the different fields, ballistics, radioactivity, etc., prepared their reports working in isolation from each other and supplied only with typewriters and paper. No group discussions or brainstorming sessions were allowed. When the groups finished their work, Beria's officials collected the completed reports, and nobody ever heard a word about what happened to the final report or what it was used for. So yeah, that is really quite fascinating, I would say. And as far as I'm aware, I've tried to look it up, but I couldn't get that far. I'm not fluent in Russian. I can kind of understand it, but I'm not fluent in it. As far as I'm aware, the Beria report has never been released to the public. After the fall of the Soviet Union, there were several documents that were released about this subject, the UFO subject, to people. And then other documents just about things that went on in the Soviet Union. But not a lot. Not a lot of documents have been released about this. And it remains to be determined if we'll ever know what Beria and his men discovered. But we can only wonder, and we can only imagine. So next, let's see what we have next here. We have our last segment here, all nearly wrapped up here. Today we've got our quote of the day, and this quote of the day comes from my grandfather, who we lovingly refer to as Mr. Nice Guy. And this one, he would say all the time at family gatherings, before we all would leave for the night. He'd say this to us. He'd say, "And be sure all that we too, nor later, you." And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for joining me here tonight on Cast with Q. Hopefully you've enjoyed this time as much as I have. And if you have any comments about Tunguska or Isom #1, please put them in the comment section below. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great night, and God bless.